You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome into today's episode of KCSN Update. I'm Tucker Franklin, hanging out with Matt Hamilton of FanDuel TV's Up at Adams. We're talking offseason. We're in the smack dab in the middle of offseason season, as if you can say. And Matt's here to talk about what the AFC West has done and kind of give a refresher to Chiefs fans who maybe haven't been paying attention to what is going on elsewhere in the division. I know I hadn't really been paying that much of attention until I did the prep for this video and for this podcast. So I'm excited to give you guys all the information that you need to about the AFC West, what's going down there. And we're going to even give some power rankings of offseason that we think. But Matt, how are you doing? It's been a minute since we talked. I got to catch up at the draft, see you in Kansas City, got to see you in person. It was a wonderful time. Did you enjoy Kansas City?
It was such a good time. I mean, they did such an amazing job with that draft, putting it together. It was really special. And, obviously the most special part was finally getting to meet you and BJ in person after all these times working together, chatting with you guys. So that was really fun. And I'm happy to be back with you. I appreciate you having me on.
I'm very excited to talk. I love talking ball with you. We're going to get you, Matt, I promise this year we're going to get you a better game to talk about than the games that I had you on to talk about last year. We didn't have the most premium matchups. Hey, maybe the Jaguars game this year will be a good premium matchup to talk about. But
if that's it, ended up being a playoff preview. Who would have thought at the time that would have been a playoff preview? But we got there.
We did. But I want to talk about something that you guys have been doing at Up and Adams, what I thought was really cool. You guys were out at the Kentucky Derby. You guys were doing some really cool stuff there at the Kentucky Derby. How was that experience? That's been a bucket list item for me, just to go out there and just kind of be out at the Kentucky Derby. It seems like just such an awesome atmosphere.
It honestly was the most special sporting experience I've ever been a part of. It was really cool. I didn't realize it's really 3 days of festivities that go on. Friday was, obviously the Derby itself is on Saturday, but Friday, the Kentucky Oaks Day was amazing. All the food and drinks on the premises were free. And you're just walking around and it's like, oh, there's Emmitt Smith and there's Randall Cobb and, there's Devontae Adams. And it was just really cool. It was really special. And, the place is just immaculate and all the history that's there. You really, you feel the weight and the gravity of that event. And it was awesome.
Absolutely. I'm not like a big horse racing guy. It's like illegal in the states of Missouri and Kansas to place a bet on horse racing. Fun fact, actually, Kansas is legal to place bets. You cannot place a bet on horses. But it's always been something that, like, as a sportsman, I think that I've always wanted to go to and just experience that. And like I mentioned, it's a bucket list item just to go be a part of the festivity, wear a suit, wear a funny hat, just all of that stuff. The whole atmosphere around the Kentucky Derby is something that has always been so intriguing, and just like, not even as like a horse racing fan, as like a very casual guy, just hanging out in the pit seems like it'd be awesome in the middle there. But also the track doesn't look all that like, you think it's a lot bigger when you're watching the race. And then I think I saw an aerial shot of it and I was like, oh, the footprint of this track is not as big as I thought it was.
Yeah, like the whole grounds are pretty big, but yeah, the track itself, it's deceptive. It does look bigger. It feels bigger in person, I think, than it looks on TV. And yeah, for myself too, as casual, like I used to watch, all the Triple Crown races with my dad growing up. Was never super into it, but even as somebody casually that watches just some of the big races, it was just such a special thing to be a part of, and they do such an incredible job on that event.
Saw that pageantry, man. I was jealous seeing you guys out there, seeing your guys' picture. You guys were dressed to the nines. Like, oh, everyone looked great. Best looking team out there. But let's get into this schedule here. The Chiefs schedule was released about a week ago, so we've had some time to kind of digest it. I sat down with Benny Heiss and we talked about all the gambling lines for the games that are out. Chiefs are favorites in every single one of their games. It's kind of wild when you look at it now, especially some of these games. The Bengals, I think they were a 3-point favorite in that game already. So I assume that line will go closer to a pick 'em as that game gets closer. But some games you think the other team would be favored and the Chiefs are favored. What is your first reaction when the schedule comes out and you see that Bengals game week 17? I know a lot of Chiefs fans, even the Bengals players, wanted that game week 1. What do you think about the Bengals being late in the season? I think that was always going to happen. And the Lions getting that week 1 nod to play against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and it's kind of become a tradition now that they play the Bengals late in the season. Yeah. I like it because the stakes are going to be higher. There's a good chance that ends up being for the for the number one seed in the AFC. Obviously, there's other contenders there too, but there's a good chance that that game has a lot of gravity to it being in week 17. And then, the Detroit in week 1 was a little bit of a surprise. There were so many options out there. Obviously, like a lot of people wanted to see that Super Bowl rematch week 1. But I think it speaks to how positive everybody is about those Lions. They've come a long way. The way they ended the season was exciting. And I mean, it's, obviously you expect the Chiefs to win that one, but it's going to be a fun matchup. That Lions offense has gotten really exciting, really explosive, and it's a much more fun matchup than I think some casual fans might think it is on paper.
100%. I've been talking myself into it ever since it came out. I think when I released I had like a tweet. I don't know what I say. I released a tweet. It wasn't like a highly anticipated event of my tweet coming out, but I tweeted like power rankings of teams I wanted to see week 1. I had the Miami Dolphins because I thought it would be a really cool storyline. Tyreek Hill coming home, the Chiefs dropping a banner on their head, but they get selected for Germany in week 9. Your thoughts on that game and kind of the Chiefs wanting the Bears to stay in Arrowhead? I know they can get a lot more money probably from Bears fans than they can from Dolphins fans coming into Kansas City. But what are your thoughts on the Dolphins playing the Chiefs in Germany in week 9?
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise because that was one of the biggest storylines this offseason when looking at the schedule is when is that Dolphins game going to happen? When is Tyreek going to Arrowhead? I know he's been pretty chirpy still online about things. So that was such an anticipated matchup. For them to get that game to Germany was interesting, but I think it speaks to how the league views their potential to grow the game in Germany. I think last year was a rousing success of what they did there, and I think it's probably the best matchup that they've given one of these international games. I mean, that's a marquee premium matchup. Those two teams are going to be as explosive as it gets. Assuming Tua stays healthy and everything, that Dolphins offense is unbelievable. And to put that game overseas, I think is a pretty big statement about how the NFL views Germany as a fan base.
Absolutely. We know that there's a lot of Chiefs fans in Germany too. Chiefs have the rights to that German market there. So very excited to see what they do in Germany. But let's talk about these divisional games, because I think maybe when you're looking at this division right off, you think of what the Chiefs did last year. AFC West spent a whole lot of money to try to keep up with the Chiefs last year, and it didn't work out. Now, there were a lot of things that happened, obviously. Tim Patrick, specifically for the Broncos, tore his ACL before the season even started, so he didn't get to see Russell Wilson with his number one wide receiver. Derek Carr and Devonta Adams didn't really work out. There's a whole lot going on there. Josh Jacobs had a really good year, but there were some hiccups along the way, and the Chiefs just have the Chargers number right now. In the last two games, they just know how to beat them. But I think that each team, when I was going through there, made some pretty key additions. I've been kind of impressed by they don't have like headline off seasons. I wouldn't say like any team has had a headline off season in the AFC West, but some very solid off seasons from these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at, it's kind of depth moves at this point because with all these teams, the reason there was so much excitement about the AFC West last year, right, was the star power, the star players that came in. But these teams couldn't keep up with the Chiefs because they didn't have the depth. They didn't have the talent in the trenches. And those are the things that don't get the headlines, that aren't as sexy, but we know you need to have if you're going to be a contending team. And that's something that I think has gotten overlooked with the Chiefs for so many years, is how much depth they've been able to build. What a great job Brett Veach has done top to bottom on this roster. It's not just about Mahomes and Kelsey. It's the whole 53-man roster and the way it's put together. And I agree with you. I think, while you didn't see the splash moves this year from those teams, I think each of those AFC West opponents definitely did a good job strengthening and shoring up some of their weaknesses.
For sure. And I got my whole legal pad of notes here. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my notes, what I've got down here. We're going to go through these teams. But I first want to start off with just the Chiefs and give people a little bit of a refresher. I'm sure that they know who the Chiefs have added in the drafts with Felix Anudike-Uzomah, Rashee Rice, Wanya Morris. Those are the first three picks that they had. And three picks I think can viably see a way to getting on the field and playing some good reps. I think Shamari Connor's another guy that you could probably see make a good impact. and some guys, maybe UDFAs, if they come in and make a good impact. But some key additions, obviously Jawan Taylor, that's going to be a big one. Donovan Smith was a late addition after the draft, who they're now saying is going to take first-team reps at left tackle. Well, Jawan Taylor's going to go back to right tackle. Drew Tranquil, that's a big signing, a signing that I think kind of flew under the radar at the time, but a signing that is going to be very beneficial for the Chiefs. And obviously Charles Omenihu as well to kind of shore up that pass rush along with Felix Anudike-Uzomah. They're going to have maybe bring back Frank Clark. I know Chris Jones has been tweeting about it every single day that he wants to see Frank Clark back up on this team. But what are your thoughts on the Chiefs offseason so far? Obviously, they lost Juju Smith-Schuster. That was a huge loss. Orlando Brown Jr., Colin Saunders in the middle of that defensive front, but they did add Keandre Coburn in the draft to kind of fill that one tech role. So what are your thoughts on the Chiefs offseason?
Yeah, and they did do a lot in the trenches defensively, which I thought was interesting. Even if they don't bring Frank Clark back, bringing in Charles Omenihu, spending 3 draft picks on the defensive line, I thought it was telling. And again, as we talked about before, building that depth in the trenches is so important. And it was probably the biggest concern I had about the team going into the draft, and to see them address that was huge. As you mentioned, Tranquil is a really nice add because, one, I mean, you take him away from the Chargers, but two, he's such a talented blitzer. He is as good a blitzer as there is from the second level. He just causes absolute chaos. So to be able to rotate him in on passing downs, have him in there fresh, and just shot out of a cannon, he's going to allow Steve Spagnuolo. We know Spags is an aggressive defensive coordinator. This is going to allow him to do some pretty fun things. And then the Donovan Smith signing, which a lot of people kind of scratch their heads about because we know they paid big money for Jawan Taylor. But Jawan Taylor, we talked about, I think you had me on when the Jawan Taylor signing kind of happened, and we talked about it. He is more comfortable on the right side. That's where he's played his whole NFL career. He's been really good as a right tackle. And I think signing him was such a good move because it allowed them that flexibility that if they wanted to go out and get a left tackle, they could still do that and move Jawan back to right. As we saw them do that with Donovan Smith, who's coming off a really rough year, a ton of penalties. That was kind of the hallmark of his year last year, but he's a very talented left tackle. He's been a good starting left tackle in this league for a long time. Again, coming off a down year, we see sometimes some of these offensive linemen, it fluctuate a little bit, as far as conditioning sometimes, as far as their play sometimes. But I think, you have him there on a 1-year deal. I think you're going to see a super motivated version of Donovan. You're going to see some of his best football. He's especially good as a pass protector. I know in the run game, he hasn't always been as proficient. But when you look at the offseason, again, when you have as much talent as the Chiefs do and you're paying Mahomes what you're paying him, you're going to have some turnover year to year. You can't keep everybody. And I love the addition as a fill-in. He's more than capable and allows this offensive line to still be, I think, a strength of this team going forward.
I do think it's worth mentioning the left guard. I think the left guard does have a lot to do with the performance of a left tackle, right? Joe Thuney at left guard is going to be beneficial for Donovan Smith. Yeah. We saw it be incredibly beneficial for Orlando Brown. And at times when Orlando Brown struggled, I think that they had a lot of help there with Joe Thuney. There's obviously things you can do with chip help and everything like that. Jerick McKinnon coming back on this roster does help with that. He's a beast in the run in the pass blocking game. So having that on there, I think is still really good. But overall, I was looking at the odds to win the Super Bowl. Chiefs are plus 600 odds on favorite, and they're minus 165 for the AFC West right now. So no matter what, it seems like anything else that the Raiders, the Chargers, the Broncos have done, but I think the Broncos might have had the best offseason in my opinion. I don't want to spoil my power rankings right now, but I think they've had a pretty good offseason, but still doesn't matter enough for the Chiefs who have absolutely run this division ever since Andy Reid stepped foot in Kansas City. They've had a stranglehold on this division. Very excited to see. It looks like I was looking up the depth chart here. Luke Godegi, is that how you say his name? The guard for the Buccaneers? Is that who the left guard was? Godecki, maybe is how you say his last name. I've never heard.
I think it's Godecki.
I've never heard of that man. I'm sorry, Luke. I've never. I don't know. I was looking it up because I was like, I wonder who their left guard was because that doesn't sound right. Yeah, by December it was Nick Leverett. So I mean, They did have a rotation. It seems like we're having
they dealt with a bunch of injuries up front, and they did have to rotate a bunch last year. But yeah, the other thing I want to mention with the Chiefs that was interesting too, obviously you mentioned losing Juju. We're all kind of wondering, how are they going to address the receiving core? Are they going to add more pieces? They didn't really do a whole lot in free agency. We brought back Justin Watson, added Richie James, so we'll see if he can make the team. But and they drafted Rice in the second round. But it's really putting a lot on Kadarius Toney's ability to stay healthy. I think Sky Moore's ability to make a jump. I think the one guy that you kind of know what you're getting from there on a consistent basis is MVS. But we know what Toney can do when he's healthy. I think he's a special talent. It's just, it's a serious concern year to year with him. And then Sky Moore, I think it really is. It puts a lot of emphasis on him continuing to work and develop. I don't think he came along quite the way we all expected him to in year one, but sometimes it happens with these receivers. It's a tough position. I know we've seen more and more guys step in and have success right away in recent years, but traditionally it is a position where you see it take, a couple of years sometimes for guys to really find their game. I mean, you even look at like a Devontae Adams, it took him a couple of years to really settle in. So, I'm not ready to write Sky Moore off yet by any means, because I love him coming out of the draft, but the pressure is going to be on him a little bit here to step up and fill more of a role this year.
That's why I always like to tell Chiefs fans to pump the brakes when it comes to rookie/first-year wide receivers. You don't see a whole lot of Kadarius Toney's come in midway through the season and have the impact that they do, especially in the Andy Reid offense. We talk about all the time on the network how it's more passing route concepts than it is just go out and run this. It's okay, feel what the leverage is, and then you can decide kind of what to do here. It's a kind of a communication or relationship building with Patrick Mahomes and whoever's slinging the rock back there with you, trying to figure out the spaces that you need to get into. So it does take a little bit. There's a little bit of a learning curve. I will say, I know a lot of people think that we're down on Justin Ross. I think it's good that Justin Ross had a season under his belt where he can learn the playbook as another guy on the injured reserve. I'm excited to see what he can do in training camp. I'm excited to see him push, Richie James. I think that's good. Like, that's good competition there that they have in the depth of this wide receiver room. I think Rashee Rice, again, a guy that I don't want Chiefs fans to totally throw out the window if he doesn't have 400 yards in the first 4 games. That's probably not going to happen. Us got to take a chill pill a little bit on that. But I think that's a great point.
And it's a good point bringing up Justin Ross too, because I know a lot of fans are excited about him and Mahomes talk about him, and I feel it's just hard, coming off of what he's coming off of. I think you can't count on him being there and being a significant part of things, just being realistic because of the injury history. But the potential there is really fascinating too. And I think whatever you can get out of him is potentially a huge bonus. But I don't think it's something, you do want to pump the brakes, temper expectations a little bit because of what he's coming off of.
All right, Matt, we're going to get into the Raiders, the Broncos, the Chargers, but we got to take a quick break first, so we'll be back right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Welcome back into KCSN Update here on KC Sports Network. I'm hanging out with Matt Hamilton of FanDuel TV and the Up and Adams program, which everyone loves. Everyone loves the Up and Adams program, and you, Matt Hamilton. So appreciate you hanging out with us as we're going through this AFC West offseason, kind of an offseason update. We're not all the way through the offseason. Teams can still make moves, make trades, there's still going to be post-June 1 cuts that some teams can make some additions of and make some cuts for. I know Dalvin Cook is one of those guys that people are thinking about, they're talking about, but that doesn't have to do with the AFC West. We're going to stick with it. We're going to go to the Raiders, who are plus 1,100 to win the AFC West this offseason. The key additions of Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Myers, Austin Hooper, and O.J. Howard are not moving the needle much for Vegas, Matt.
Yeah, and again, I think, like we talked about before, I think these are depth. They made a lot of depth moves. The quarterback switch obviously was the big one. And I don't know if you saw the article in The Athletic. yesterday about Devontae Adams and some of his grievances. I mean, it had to be hard. One of the biggest selling points on him wanting to go to Vegas is getting to play with his friend Derek Carr, and that's over in a year. So I can understand the frustration from his standpoint. Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is a step back necessarily. I think it's a lateral move. Again, health is always the biggest thing with Jimmy. But with this Josh McDaniels offense, we saw it last year. It's kind of based around the run game. Josh Jacobs had a phenomenal season, and adding Jacoby Myers into the mix, I think makes this receiving core a lot stronger. With him, Devontae, and Hunter Renfrow, that's a pretty good trio. Obviously, they lose Darren Waller in that trade, but they have some interesting tight ends. Drafting Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, getting him in the second round, I think was big. And Austin Hooper's a guy we've seen, put up a ton of production in this league. OJ Howard's an interesting, as superior athlete. Hasn't quite put it all together yet, but there's ability there. So there are a lot of pieces for Josh McDaniels to play with in this offense. But it remains to be seen what he can do as a head coach. It hasn't gone well so far. We know he's a creative offensive mind. He's as good an offensive coordinator as there's been. But as a head coach, the jury is still kind of out. And, they did a bunch to address that defense, especially in the draft. The first round pick, Tyree Wilson. There's a lot of talent up front there with Max Crosby, Chandler Jones, and Tyree now in the mix. But that secondary, the second level, there's still a lot of questions there for this Raiders team as well. And I still don't know if I see that defense slowing down the Chiefs.
Right. That's what I was about to say. If you still stack them up against this Chiefs offense, I know the Chiefs wide receiver core isn't what it was a year ago or even what it was 2 years ago when you were talking about that. This is probably maybe one of the talent-wise, you could say the lesser ones of the Mahomes receiving course. I still think that they are better than the Raiders. I think it's a 5.5 point line when they first play them in Las Vegas, and I think if you're a Chiefs fan, you want to go hammer that -5.5 there because Chiefs have historically played really well in Vegas, and with it being in Week 12, that's kind of late in the season to play them for the first time. Byron Young is another guy in the draft that they got. And again, so to shore up that defensive front, they went heavy trenches. You mentioned Michael Mayer. That was a guy that when the Chiefs were sitting there at 31, I was thinking, man, how fun would Michael Mayer be in this Chiefs offense with Travis Kelce, what they could do with him. And then once you saw the tight end coach with his hand on his head when they showed the draft room, you thought, okay, well, maybe it's not Michael Mayer for the Chiefs. But yeah, they lose Derek Carr, obviously Darren Waller. Andrew Billings is another guy that I think losing them is big on the defensive side of the ball. But obviously Derek Carr and Darren Waller are going to be the two pieces that are very vacantly missing from that team that we are so used to seeing twice a year as Kansas City Chiefs fans. And Devontae Adams, we were just having a conversation about this, imagine being in Devontae Adams' shoes, where you come to Las Vegas to go play with the guy you played in high school and college, and he's gone a year later. I can understand why he's upset. I can understand why he would want to get out if he does want to get out. I'm not saying that he does, but if he does, I would understand that very clearly. But weeks 12 and 16 are when the Chiefs play the Raiders. A little late in the season for these Raiders matchups. I thought that this would kind of be a matchup when I was looking at the calendar that maybe they'd push up a little bit sooner just because of the competition with the Raiders and the Chiefs might not be there like it would be with the other teams in the division.
Yeah, it is an interesting decision to put them a little bit later. And I think also, we saw the Raiders in that first game last year, with their new regime in place, give the Chiefs some problems out of the gates. Remember, the Chiefs needed to make a furious comeback in that game to pull out the win. But they're not going to have that element of surprise this year either. We saw them play a lot of press, a lot of man coverage, and the Chiefs had to kind of adjust their strategy as the game went on. And obviously the second game, the Chiefs just kind of ran away with it. I think we're going to see two games that are kind of similar to that, again, assuming Casey is healthy. And as you said, like with the receiving core, I don't know if I want to say it's not as talented as you say, it's just not as proven. And I think, the tone, I think the potential is there for this thing to be really special. It's just, we got to see it on the field and we got to see it, consistently. And it's going to be really interesting to watch. But yeah, that Raiders secondary still needs a lot of work. So, I think I think the Chiefs still definitely have a clear edge there.
The potential is interesting because this quite possibly could be the highest potential receiver room that Patrick Mahomes has had. I mean, he obviously had Tyreek Hill, but like the potential of Tyreek Hill, you knew what Tyreek Hill was going to be. There's a lot of like you mentioned, unproven wide receivers that could be really good. And then Jerick McKinnon, you had Jerick McKinnon into it with the passing game as well.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce. So I mean, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of weapons there. That's very exciting.
It's crazy, by the way. Speaking of Jerick McKinnon, getting him back, I think is so big for this team. He did all the little things. He talked about the pass protection. But the other thing I was doing some research for the show with Kay this morning, and he had more touchdown catches than Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton combined last year. Like,
oh my God.
We can't underestimate the 9 touchdown catches, just how much he meant to this passing game too, not just in the pass protection, but as a receiver. He was one of the most valuable players on this team last year. And I know they say running backs are a dime a dozen, whatever, but he's a special player because he's a unique player too. It's hard to find running backs that are that good in pass protection and can catch the ball the way that he can, and are just willing to do whatever it takes to help the team out and play unselfishly the way that he does.
He just fits so well with the team, and I'm glad that they got him back. I'm glad that they did. They were needing a running back, but I always think that Jerick McKinnon was coming back. I think he didn't want to do phase 1 of OTAs. Are you kidding me? He had to wait until after that was done. All these veteran guys are going to be signing these contracts after because they don't want to do OTAs. But what I think maybe the most interesting offseason in the AFC West is the Denver Broncos. I think their biggest addition, obviously, is Sean Payton. Mike McGlinchey obviously is a big addition, but like Sean Payton's going to be the biggest addition. Sean Barber talked about the importance when we were on Benny and the Bets of just having an adult in the room now with Sean Payton and Russell Wilson and all that. So I think that that's probably their biggest addition. I have that underlined on my key additions because maybe you might not see it. He's not going to suit up on Sundays, but you're going to see that on the field for sure. Obviously, Samaje Perine, a guy who has kind of had the Chiefs number when he was playing with the Bengals. He's played really well against the Chiefs, and Ben Powers as well. They kind of shared up there. Offensive front. They had a lot of question marks up there, especially with some injuries. But what do you think about the Denver Broncos in the offseason that they had this year?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. It's Sean Payton is the biggest acquisition in the division. He gives some real legitimacy there to that coaching staff. And you've seen the approach that they've taken this offseason, and you kind of get a sense for what they want to do, right? They've tried to totally overhaul that offensive line, which was atrocious last year, bringing guys like Mike McGlinchey. I know he had some struggles at times in San Francisco as well, but it's still a huge upgrade over what they've had. And they've beefed up the tight end room, adding guys, they have Dulcich who flashed last year, but adding guys like Chris Manhertz and Troutman, who are a little bit better blockers. We'll see what goes on with Javonte Williams. I know obviously they want him back as soon as possible. As you said, adding Samaje Perine. I think the writing's on the wall. I think Sean Payton knows what he has to do with Russell, which is build this thing around the run game first. That's why they added a lot of beef. They added a lot of depth at running back. They want to ground and pound and hit you off play action. That's where Russell is at his best. I know there's the whole let Russell cook thing. Like, that's not when he plays his best football. If you look at it historically, the teams that he's on that win, they run the ball first. Even, obviously the Marshawn Lynch years, we really saw that, but even beyond Marshawn Lynch, those were the teams that were the most successful in Seattle, were built off of the run game first. And I think Sean Payton knows that, and that's how he's going to attack. It was funny, we had him on our Super Bowl show right after he took the Denver job. And Josh Jacobs was coming on after him, and I think he was pissed that Jacobs got hit with that franchise tag, because I would not have been surprised after seeing them together if he brought him into Denver, because I think he knows the key to success here is going to be getting that run game in working order.
Absolutely. Then bulking up the offensive line says that as well. I was looking through, I didn't see a ton of departures really they re-signed a lot of their guys. Draymond Jones is probably the big departure for this defense, and it is a big departure for them. I think he's in Seattle now, but I other than that, I didn't really see a whole lot of guys that they lost and that they would be hurting for. I think they improved overall this offseason, especially Marvin Mims, I think, is a good get at 63 in the draft, and they got Drew Sanders. And Drew Sanders, again, is another really good as a linebacker out of Arkansas. Riley Moss as well. So they had a good. They didn't have a whole lot of draft picks to work with because they kind of gave them away for Russ. But they had to work with.
Payton, don't forget to.
That's true.
They got to hit both places, but so it's without having that draft capital, I think you're right. They were able to still improve significantly, and it's they're not going to be. I would be very surprised if a Sean Payton coach team ends up being a pushover this year. I think he's going to get Russell back to being more like the Russell Wilson we saw, for his first 11 years in the league.
The Chiefs play them twice in 3 weeks. We were kind of talking about this before we started the podcast. A really tough draw, I think, for the Chiefs. I think the first one's at home, and then they go play the Chargers. Then they play in Denver. I could have that backwards, but week 6 and 8 is when they get the Broncos here. Matt, is this the year that the Broncos finally beat the Chiefs? It's been 14 straight games or something like that. But do you think this is the year the Chiefs drop one?
I don't know. I mean, again, I like what the Broncos have done, but the Chiefs are just are so.
They're the Chiefs.
The one thing that you were in, as you said, we kind of talked about this a little bit before the show, but the one thing that concerns me about having all those division games, those division games 3 weeks in a row like that, and playing the same opponent twice in a 3 week span, is if injuries set in. Because if you get caught at the wrong time of year, that could be devastating. Like, let's say, somebody important has to miss a couple weeks and you miss them for both those games. It definitely opens the door.
100%. And that's what worries me kind of about that. But that's not their first divisional game of the year is week 6. I think last year they had a week 2 game against the Chargers. So they got the division. I think the division games happened pretty early for a lot of the teams. Week 6 seems pretty late in the year for your first divisional game.
Yeah, I think they wanted to get a few different, marquee quarterback matchups in there, or interesting quarterback matchups in there early. I mean, they get the Lions thing to open, but then you get Trevor Lawrence in week 2, you get Justin Fields in week 3, and you get Aaron Rodgers in week 4. So, those are all, I think, matchups that are going to be easy to market, fun games. That people are dying to see. So I think they want to give us a few of those early, give us some different things that we haven't, seen with the Chiefs. Obviously, we haven't seen Rodgers and Mahomes yet. We were supposed to see it twice. Neither one of them worked out. Rodgers with COVID, Mahomes was hurt the one year. So I think they wanted to get that one in early, and then Fields too. I think that's going to be a matchup that I don't know if the Bears are going to be any good, but Justin Fields is fun to watch, and
right.
Yeah, so I think that played into it probably from the schedule maker's point of view a little bit. And, having those Chargers games a little bit later in the year doesn't hurt either, especially, getting that week 18 one in there could be a pretty meaningful matchup as well.
Let's talk about the Chargers offseason. But first, before we do that, we're going to have to take our last break. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back to talk about the Chargers and give our power rankings for the offseason and some predictions for the AFC West. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for hanging out with us here at KCSN Update. I'm hanging out with Matt Hamilton. We're going through the AFC West offseason update. And we're on the big one. I think this is the big one that everyone has kind of been waiting for. What have the Chargers done this offseason? Other than adding what I think is a really good offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, no longer the offensive coordinator. They get Kellen Moore. That's a great addition for them. They're plus 340 to win the AFC West. The Broncos, I don't know if I mentioned this, plus 550 to win the AFC West. So plus 340 for the AFC West for the Chargers. Key additions. They kind of had a quiet offseason, I think. They didn't really do a whole lot of moving around. I think that where their best additions came in the draft. They lose Drew Tranquil is probably one of their biggest losses, which obviously comes to the Chiefs, and Nasir Adderley as well to retirement. But Eric Hendricks, they do sign him as well, kind of heading into this season here. So, Matt, what do you think about the Chargers offseason, kind of coming off of that devastating playoff loss that they had?
Yeah, and this was a big offseason for them. Even though they didn't take those big swings, yeah, I think you look at some of the little moves that they did. You mentioned Eric Kendricks. Their run defense has been awful for the last couple of years, and he's really going to help that out a lot. They've really struggled in the middle of that defense, and he makes them a lot better instantly. One of the better run-stopping linebackers in this league. And you look on the offensive side of the ball, it's interesting. You still have kind of a lingering Austin Eckler stuff. I think he's still going to be there next year if I had to guess, but that still hasn't fully been resolved either. And then, one of the things that I think might be a little bit underrated right now is just having Rashawn Slater back healthy. Remember, he missed almost the entire year last year, and it really hampered their offense big time once he went out. And then the draft was interesting because I think a bunch of people had a feeling they were going to go wide receiver. I think a lot of people thought it might be Zay Flowers. They instead go with Quentin Johnson, the big target out of TCU. So you got, I think what this signals to me is Keenan Allen, I know he operates a lot out of the slot as it is, but I think we're seeing him kind of transition to maybe that Larry Fitzgerald later stage plan where we saw him operate pretty much exclusively out of the slot. Rely on his ability to find space, his route running. He may not have the long speed the same way anymore, but he knows how to get open. So you're able to kick him inside of the slot almost permanently. And then you have two monster targets on the outside with Quentin Johnson and Mike Williams. Just, nobody's winning a jump ball against either of those guys. And you still have, guys like Joshua Palmer rotate in, who we've seen make some plays. So, it was interesting to see, the Chargers do have some other needs, but just going all in to support Justin Herbert and give him as many weapons as possible.
I think it's a great point you bring up because I do think that this Chargers team does still have some holes going into this season. They have some needs that they still need to address. Another draft that I like is I don't like to say his name because I know I mess it up every time. The kid from USC, I call him Tuli T because his last name is quite the mouthful. I wrote down a pronunciation, but I'm not even going to try it because I don't want to disrespect him. I like that ad for them. But yeah, the Chargers are a very interesting team. I do think that, Mike Williams always has really good games against the Chiefs. It seems like he shows up and he plays really well against the Chiefs. The Chargers have played the Chiefs really close really ever since Justin Herbert became the starting quarterback. And then the Chiefs just, were able to beat them twice last year and ended up being the better team out of those two games. But I'm very interested to see kind of how the Chargers do stack up because I do still think that the Chiefs have them beat, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think the Chiefs defense right now is maybe the best it's been in the Mahomes era. Just kind of looking at it right now, I think that it's a pretty stout defense. The addition of Drew Tranquil and their ability to have more guys rotated in that linebacker core, the secondary being so young guys, I think that they can stack up well against what the Chargers bring, but getting big bodies like the Quentin Johnson, I think is a good addition for them because they just keep stacking big bodies to go up against these cornerbacks that the Chiefs have. And these teams are obviously going to be built to beat the Chiefs, right? Like they're gearing up to beat the Chiefs. That's how they have to get into the playoffs is by beating the Chiefs. So it couldn't be not the best matchup that the Chiefs will face all year when it comes to receivers versus their corners, their secondary. But I still think the Chiefs have the edge there.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the Chargers have to show they can beat him consistently first. And the other, I mentioned Rashawn Slater missing time. The other thing that was a big factor last year was, even though the Chargers did have some success, they made the playoffs, but they lost Joey Bosa for a long time too. Don't forget, he only played in 5 games last year, so they dealt with some pretty significant injuries at 2 key positions, pass rusher and left tackle. That definitely hampered them, and obviously their receiving core was banged up all year too. So. Just adding more depth in all of those spots is big, but also just getting healthy at those spots is going to be huge. So I don't think we saw the best version of the Chargers really last year for the majority of that season. And I think just by nature of being healthier, if they're able to stay healthy, I think this team is going to be even more dangerous this year than it was last.
It's been a problem for the Chargers, their health. I don't know if it's the water in LA makes them softer or what it is, but it's got to be something by week 7. Who knows how healthy these two teams will be, how healthy the Chargers will be, how healthy the Chiefs will be. They play them in 7 in week 18 as well. Hopefully it's the Chiefs backups versus the Chargers starters. That's what you're always hoping for at a week 18 game. Hopefully they got everything locked up and they don't have to play very much for that. Not shocked at all by the placement of these games. I think that seeing one I would maybe one earlier in the season and one week 18 is I think you can anticipate. You can kind of pencil that one in. Was as long as Justin Herbert's going to be the quarterback of the Chargers, you can kind of pencil on week 18 as the Chargers versus the Chiefs.
And I think it's a good one to pencil. I mean,
yeah,
it's that's been such an exciting matchup. As you said, the one risk you run if you're the schedule makers is just if the Chiefs have everything locked up. You want to, we kind of get robbed of a Mahomes versus Herbert game. But yeah, I mean, as far as the teams that you want to see from that division week 18, I think the Chargers is definitely the best choice as of right now.
So going back through it, minus 165, Chiefs are favorites to win the AFC West. Second best, plus 340 the Los Angeles Chargers, plus 550 are the Denver Broncos, and plus 1100 are the Vegas Raiders. Matt, I want to know, who do you think of the AFC West, Chiefs included here, had the best offseason? When you look at just kind of top to bottom with draft included, who do you think kind of won the offseason? We can put it in air quotes. Who won the offseason so far?
I think I'd have to say the Broncos, just that Sean Payton, you can't underestimate how much of a difference coaching can make. And I think that's their only shot of really salvaging this thing with Russell was to go get him, go get a coach of that caliber. And I think that gives them a chance of turning this thing around. But I do think everybody had positive off seasons. I think the Raiders still have the biggest question marks for me.
Yeah.
The Chargers, I think, are still the toughest competition for the Chiefs in the division. But I really do. I think all of these teams got better this offseason, and but that includes the Chiefs. And they had to get creative. They suffered a couple of big losses in there, but they got creative, and you just can't say enough about Brett Veach and the job that he does and his ability to find talent through the drafts, through free agency, get creative. There is no stone unturned by this front office ever. And they're going to find a way to restock this roster every single year, no matter, what challenges they're faced with.
And it looks like they could have some UDFAs come in and really compete for some time, too. The Chiefs spent the most money, I believe, out of every team in undrafted free agents, I believe, just over $1 million. I think it was 1.125 or something like that. Semantics at that point. But they also gave the most guaranteed money to a lot of undrafted free agents. If you're going to give guaranteed money to undrafted free agents, they're probably going to make the roster. You probably have a good shot, good idea that they're going to make the roster. So very interesting offseason. You've seen Brett Veach dominate the undrafted free agent market really ever since he started taking over for the Chiefs. I have to agree with you. The Denver Broncos, when I was looking through their offseason, I was leaned over to Joel, our social media guy, and I was like, who did they lose? Like, I'm trying to figure out, I kept going through to see, who their free agents were, who they lost. I mean, Draymond Jones is obviously a big one, but, other than that, they added Mike McGlinchey, added Samaje Perine, Ben Powers, really bulked up that that offensive line and the defensive line as well, even though they do lose Draymond Jones. They're going to be a tough team to play. I think they're going to play the Chiefs tough. I think that every team's going to play the Chiefs tough. Not necessarily convinced that the Raiders are at this point. I think the Garoppolo experiment might blow up in their face. But listen, they got to try it. All right, they got to give Josh McDaniels, his New England guys, his Jacoby Myers, his Jimmy Garoppolo, all those guys. He's got to give them to him to see if his offense will work. But Matt, I appreciate you hanging out with me, talking some AFC West, talking some additions, some off-season football. I know this off-season content, it's sometimes a struggle. But I'm glad to struggle with you here on KC Sunday.
I appreciate you having me talk. I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day. Always have a great time talking with you. But yeah, it's going to be a fun year in the AFC West. I think this year in the AFC West will be more like what we expected last year to be.
Ooh, I think I agree with you. Quick before I let you go, how do you think this division's going to shape up? I'll give you mine first. I think I've got Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders. That might be boring because that's kind of what the odds are right now, but I think Vegas kind of hit the nail on the head with it.
I agree with you. That's how I have it going. I see the Broncos taking a big step forward, but not a big enough step to surpass the Chargers, and the Raiders. It's hard for me to get on board yet. Not that, there's just too many unknowns there. Not that I don't, I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he can be serviceable there. Especially if you have Josh Jacobs running the way he did, but there's just too many questions.
A lot going on, and I appreciate Matt, you hanging out with me once again. That's going to do it for today's episode of KCS Update. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with us here as we give you an update on the AFC West offseason. Let us know in the comments section below if you're watching this on YouTube, if you like it, or what you want to hear this offseason. What do you want us to talk about this offseason? There's so much that we can talk about, dive into, position-wise, league-wise, too. Love to dive into more of what you guys want to hear from us here on this channel. So make sure you like and subscribe as well. If you do enjoy the video, if you're listening to this on your favorite audio platform, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to be a friend, tell a friend, as Pat McAfee says, about the KCSN Chiefs channel and all of our wonderful channels here covering the Royals, the Chiefs, Sporting Kansas City, KU, K-State, and Mizzou. We got 2 Missouri Tigers here. We didn't even talk about Blaine Gabbert as a backup quarterback as a key addition for the Kansas City Chiefs.
It's true. I talked to, we had Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith on with Kay at the draft, and talked to them about Blaine a little bit, since we had some overlap, and they're excited. They like him already. They got the chance to talk to him, and they're excited about it. But yeah, no, we got more Mizzou in Kansas City.
Yes, sir. We have to talk about it. Hopefully we can see some Blaine Gabbert at the late game situations against the Raiders, and maybe even week 18. Maybe we could see a full Blaine Gabbert game. That's what I'm cheering for. Personally. Yeah. But again, thank you guys for listening so much. We'll be back next week talking with some more updates on this offseason. So thank you guys. I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for watching this production of KC Sports Network, the fastest growing sports media network in Kansas City. Check out these videos that feature our team of more than 15 former players, insiders, and analysts bringing you the best Chiefs coverage you can find. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.